Hello, everybody. Stay tuned for another special Football Friday episode of A Matter of Principle. Hello, everyone. My name is Vito Quaglia, and this is A Matter of Principle. Today's guest is legendary high school football coach Paul Marranca. Coach had a long and successful career, spending most of his time at Wyoming Area, where his team won numerous district and conference titles over the years. He established a winning tradition at WA, and it's a great honor for me to have him on as a guest. I worked with him when I was an administrator at Wyoming Area, and I saw firsthand the kind of high-quality program that he had going on. So welcome, Coach Marranca.
Thanks, Vito. It's nice to be here.
Well, first things first, I missed you a couple weeks ago when you were in. I know they renamed and rededicated the weight room, but I guess it's the Performance Center now, the Paul Marranca Performance Center. So what was that like to come back and visit with some of the guys that maybe you haven't seen in a little while?
Well, I'll tell you, first of all, it's a humbling experience to have your name placed on a building. Our program at Wyoming Area has been a joy in my life. 25 years ago, our program needed a better facility to lift weights. We were lifting in the basement of a gym. And I asked our superintendent at the time if I can have this old trucking terminal, which was right across from the stadium, and I'll turn it into a weightlifting facility. But the key point was it wasn't going to cost the school a dime. And that was the beginning of what is now the Wyoming Area Football Alumni Association. And it's been 25 years since that project started. We have donated more than $1 million back to the school district in terms of facilities and scholarships and so on. So to have that facility named in my honor has been a humbling experience.
Well, and I tell you this, and for people listening, you know, I started at Wyoming Area as an assistant principal in 2000. So I was there for just about 20 years. And I saw during that time, you know, the growth of the Alumni Association from, you know, like the annual Ring of Pride induction ceremony and the game, you know, at halftime when you bring back all different players and acknowledge so many great things that have happened with those players over the years. And I've also gone on to work at other school districts. And a lot of times when we have conversations, people ask me about Wyoming Area and how is it that Wyoming Area is consistently, you know, a winner? You know, they're not undefeated every year, but very seldom do they have a terrible season. Even when they have a bad season, they're always very competitive and successful. And my answer always is, for lack of all the X's and O's, is consistency and quality people involved in the program. Can you explain a little bit about what I'm saying there?
Yeah, I think that's a key point. One of the things I'm most proud of is that we've established a tradition and legacy at Wyoming Area, and that my entire coaching staff were kids that played for me. And if you look at Randy Spencer now and his coaching staff after winning the state championship a couple years ago, all those kids are former players. So they've grown up in a system. They understand the philosophy. They understand the discipline. They understand what it takes to be a winner. And I think they pass that on to the kids. And that's such an important part, that consistency. And they understand, the kids see what those people did before them. And that legacy is so important.
And the tradition of, I mean, there's so many players in the program whose dads or uncles played, even some of their grandfathers. I mean, when you go back to, you know, the 60s and 70s when the jointure happened. And I think there's a tremendous sense of pride. You know, I think even before, when they won the state title, I mean, that puts you over the hump into, you know, really rarefied air, elite status. But, you know, even the decades before that with the conference titles, the district titles, there was always tremendous amount of pride in and around the school community, but really the whole west side of the valley. For anyone who hasn't come to a Wyoming Area football game, the facilities are outstanding. The crowds are loud. The school community really turns out. There's a tremendous amount of energy every year. And it really doesn't matter if they're 10-0 or 7-3 or, you know, 5-5. The same energy is always there. So the fans have always shown up for the Warriors.
Yes. And I think that's that whole tradition that goes back, I think, right to the beginning of the jointure. I played on its first football team in 1966, and Jack Henzis was our coach. And believe me, he was like a second father to me. I end up then going away to school and then coming back to the area to coach with Coach Henzis. And I've modeled my program after him and everything that he did to establish community relations, to establish great academics in the school system, to the players having pride in what they are and what they do. And I think that one of the things that we've always prided ourselves on was good sportsmanship. And in the years that I coached, I think we won the sportsmanship award 4 years in a row, which is unheard of. But our kids were always gleaned to, hey, be sportsmen on the field, but you can play tough football at the same time.
Absolutely. And I was on the PIAA District 2 committee a few years when we won that award. And that was, big sense of pride. And you're going there to represent the school. You're on the committee to serve all the schools, but when it's your school that gets, a recognition. And honestly, something like that, I think as a school administrator, it probably means more than the wins and losses because you know that your guys are out there representing the school and the community the right way.
Oh, sure. Being good role models. And again, going back to the Alumni Association and the coaching staff, all those guys, we promote being good community citizens, being good role models. So these kids coming up through the system see what you were, how you played, and now what you are. And I think that's so important. That gives Wyoming Area a little edge, I think, above everybody else in the area. It's that pride.
Well, and I think you have a few things, well, more than a few things, but definitely a few things kind of going for you that make those things happen. Number one, you have a great pitch man in Louis Champy. I mean, a lot of schools probably have alumni associations, booster clubs, things like that, but not everybody has a Lou Champy. I mean, he has more energy than a 4-year-old, after drinking a case of soda. He's always going. Does a great job promoting everything, finding new ways to get more money into the program, to give back, to the community and the program. But I'm sure it's a treasure to have somebody like Louis around.
Oh, absolutely. Louis played for me. He was undersized, too small, too slow, but he had a heart of a lion. And when he graduated and I first pitched to him that I needed to start an alumni association so we can give back to the community, he jumped on board. He and I are co-founders of the Alumni Association. But as you said, he's like a dog with a bone. You give him a job to do and automatically he'll get that done 100 times over. And he has been, I may be the figurehead of the Alumni Association, but he's certainly the heart.
Well, and another thing, and again, I would know, the budgetary things because, working there for so long, and it's not like there was an unlimited budget. I mean, there was a good amount of support and resources there that the school district could provide, but there's a limit to that. So, the need for all those, alternative funding sources is so important, but still, regardless of that, every week in, week out, season after season, the program always looked sharp. You know what I mean? Like the way the kids, the uniforms, the way they carried themselves, the way the pregame went, it was always a top-notch program. And that's, I think, what all the great programs have, right? The pay, attention to detail and making sure that, the small stuff is not forgotten about. Was that something that just came to you when leading this program? Is that something you learned as a player under Coach Henzis, or stuff that you just said, this is how we're going to take care of business here at WA?
Well, first of all, under Coach Henzis, he was a master of attention to detail, and his programs at Dunmore were just phenomenal because he took average kids and got them to play above their heads, and his technique and detail was extensive. I tried to put that in our program, so naturally, Coach Henzis is my role model, and I tried to put all of that into our program. We did the little things. We did the things on special teams that a lot of schools don't pay attention to, and we've always had good special teams. We did the techniques in terms of how we played a game, and our kids see that how hard our coaching staff works, that they put that work in on the field, and they see the results. And I think it's that tradition then that is established.
Another thing that I saw, as an observer watching the games, but then watching other programs in the area, you were one of the ones that I thought really led in making sure that you use your personnel and then you fit your philosophy around that. Sometimes coaches are hey, I'm a Delaware wing T guy. This is what we're going to do. Or I'm going to just chuck it, have 5 receivers and we're just going to do this. But year in and year out, you guys always morphed into whatever kind of talent you had.
Well, again, I think if you're going to coach and you want to be successful, you can't go out and recruit the best quarterback or the best wide out or the best lineman. You have to take what you have and then mold them to how you can use them to the best of their ability. And you're right. I mean, there are times when we had Gary Dolan, I was accused probably of child abuse for running him so much, but he was a horse and you took advantage of that. When I had Kenny Kopechny and Rich Mazinski, great wide receivers, we threw the ball more. So again, I think a coach, if he's going to get the best out of his kids, has to adapt to the kids, not the kids adapting to the program.
And another thing that was true, during your time there, before really the expanding of the classifications, most of the time, Wyoming Area was playing teams larger than them, and always competing. And at that, not to knock any of the programs now, but it seems like there was a time, maybe in the recent past, the last couple of decades, when there were more powerful schools on your schedule. In the Wyoming Valley Conference, whether you're playing Berwick, Valley West was always and then you had the 3 Wilkes-Barre schools in and out. So it seemed like you guys were always up against teams that had more kids on the sideline, maybe more to draw from in the elementary schools coming up. Did you always feel that it was David against Goliath, or did you feel that you were on even par regardless?
Well, we tried to promote that David and Goliath a little bit, but we weren't a very big school. We were always a AA school, maybe crossing over the line to AAA when they had 4 categories. But we played up in schedule. You're right. We played the Quad A schedule, and we played the Hazeltons and the Williamsports and Valley West, and we were at that time probably a AA program at best. But I think it was how, because of that, we taught our kids technique. We were always in great condition. The weightlifting program provided us with being strong, that we were able to compete with those schools. And I think that showed what our program was all about. And our kids always took pride in saying, hey, we're going to play Williamsport, or we're going to play Hazelton. And we used to go down to Berwick. We used to love to play in Berwick. It was a great atmosphere, and we were very successful in Berwick. So our kids took pride in that.
And you mentioned Berwick and the other programs that were powerful, powerhouses really at the time. What you've seen a lot of coaches come and go, and is there a common thread that you saw in those schools? When they were competing with you guys, and they were turning positive programs in every year. What do all the great programs have, or all the great successful coaches? Are there certain characteristics that they all share?
Oh, absolutely. One is hard work. They're not afraid to put in time and effort. I learned so much from George Curry and how successful his program was. And that's where I said we needed to improve our facilities after going down to see Berwick and their weight training facility at the stadium, that we had to change and we had to do things that went beyond what the norm was. The other thing is coaches work all year round. I used to get upset when coaches at Wyoming Area and other sports used to say football gets everything. But the answer is no. Football works all year round, and they work hard to do what they get. And actually, with the Alumni Association, we were fortunate to give over and beyond in certain things. But many coaches at that time were only working to their season. Once their last game was over, they didn't work at it. We worked all the time. We went 12 months a year. We went to clinics. We went to conferences. We did 7-on-7s in the off season. So when you want to work as hard as we did, then you will be successful. And I have to say right now, Wyoming Area's athletic program is the best it has ever been in the 50 some years that the school district is there, because we have coaches in all the sports that work hard in the off season, that train in the weight training facility, that go to clinics, that put their kids through a 12-month program. And that's why they've been so successful.
And you couple that with the fact that at Wyoming Area, there was always a very high standard for academics. So the student athletes that are involved in all those programs are also held to a high standard in the classroom. So when you have those two things combined, I think it's I wouldn't say easier, but you're going to be able to do some more things with student athletes that are that committed, in the classroom as well.
Oh, absolutely. And we've always pushed for good academics, and our faculty knew also that if you had a football player in class, if there was an issue, all they had to do was pick up the phone and call me, and that issue would be taken care of. And our kids knew that. And the kids knew that if they got out of line, there were consequences. And so therefore, football was an important part of their life. So therefore, academics had to be a big part of their life also.
Throughout your career, I'm sure you've had every kind of athlete imaginable on your teams. What does it take to motivate players that have different, needs? I mean, some guys probably are guys that you had to bark at a little bit more than others, things like that. Like how quickly did you read your guys to understand how to motivate each one? Or was it just that they all kind of fell into, understanding what your expectations were? Did you have to kind of differentiate your coaching, if you will?
It's kind of a combination of both. The kids, first of all, I was a very vocal coach on the practice field. So they knew where I was all the time. But secondly, you had to know who could take a little bit more criticism than others. And you had to know their personalities. And there were certain kids I could bark at all the time that it made them even more upset that they played harder. And there were other kids that you had to be careful of that were a little more fragile, that you didn't want to harp at them because they were a little more sensitive. So that's something as a coach that you learn. But certain kids were motivated by being screamed at a little bit. Other kids, you didn't have to say much, just had to tell them something was wrong and they would make the change. So, but that's a coaching point. That's something you learn by experience.
Now, when you coach, did you go to a lot of clinics, or did you I personally, in my coaching experience, I used to get a lot more out of talking to the local coaches, in the hospitality room at a clinic, because they really understood what high school coaches go through. Sometimes you go to clinics and you're listening to D1 guys with tremendous athletes giving you advice, and it always doesn't transfer to the skill level you have in high school. But were there things that, you, as your program evolved over the years, that you took from the college level, or were you just basically just build it around the skill that you had?
Again, I think it's all of that. One, working local camps where you got to talk to local coaches and you got to share ideas with other high school coaches in the area. Two, I said, I used to always, when college coaches came in recruiting, I used to sit them in my office, always pick their brain as to, tell me what do you do in this situation, or how do you teach wide receivers this, or this is how. I always tried to learn something from every coach that came into my office, and I picked their brain. And again, and you find out that sometimes there are coaches on the Division I level that don't know as much as high school coaches in the area know in terms of running a program. College coaches very often are locked into one position that they don't have the overall scope of how to run a total program. And I found that very interesting in my process.
Now, when it comes to coaching as long as you did, and, successful season, yes, but some seasons maybe not as successful, criticism comes along with that. How did you handle criticism, or did you just tune out and not listen to anything, or did you have different ways that you handled criticism when it did come?
We had an open door with parents. I used to tell parents, you have a problem, come in and see me. And we'd sit down and talk. And the biggest gripe, and I found with most parents, is they're looking out for their child as one, and I'm looking out for 60. And you had to make them realize that, hey, come and watch practice for a week and then tell me if your child is better than who's playing in front of them or should get more playing time and so on. It usually was never the kid that was complaining. It was always the parent. And we tried to make them understand that. And again, in most cases, parents are parents, and no matter what you say, they're not going to change because they're looking through blinders. But if they're reasonable and understand it, if you've been around sports, most parents understood, what was going on. I often said that our program did more for the kids than the kids often did for the program. And that's important because if you carried 50 or 60 kids on a roster, you're only going to get 25 in a game, in a close game. So what they do in practice and how they help the team in practice was important. And I tried to stress that to parents.
So in the time that you coached, and I'm sure, I don't want to put you on the spot with this, but I'm sure, there were certain seasons that stand out to you, whether it's because of the athletes that you had or, the record you had, the championship won, things like that. But if you had to think back over your career, is there one season that stands out that you feel like, hey, we really did a great job that year? And it doesn't have to be your most successful wins and losses. Maybe there's another reason. Is there anything that stands out to you?
There's been a couple of teams like that, where I thought we got to 7-3 or 8-3 with the team that really was not that good. But over the 29 years that I was coaching, certain teams do stand out, and certainly naturally the 80 team, which was the undefeated team at Wyoming Area, stands out because we, again, weren't that big or talented, but I thought it was just a unique group of people that come together that played as a team. And you had some leaders on there that were just outstanding, that carried us right through the season.
Speaking of leaders on your team, were there certain things that you looked for in guys, maybe when they were freshmen and sophomores, that you thought, hey, this might be a kid his junior, senior year that we could lean on, that might be a captain for us? Were there certain, characteristics in your players that you looked for?
Certainly. I always lead by example. Show me the kid that's out there that's working hard during our summer conditioning program, who's not taking it easy when you can. There's an old saying that champions are made when no one else is looking. And you look for that kid that's always working in the weight room and and it doesn't always have to be that verbal leadership. It's the leader by example that to me is the most important.
What would be, and it doesn't have to be game related, I mean, what would be the thing that you're most proud of in your coaching career?
Well, I said when I was at the dedication a couple of weeks ago, I said there are three things that are most important to me. And it's not the wins or it's not the championships. The first was that we've established a great tradition and legacy at Wyoming Area. The second is I established the Alumni Association, which has given back to the school and community. And the third was the coaching staff tradition there of all the kids, all the staff being former players. I think those three things I'm most proud of.
What would you say if there's a brand new coach? I mean, every year there's somebody that is it's their first head coaching job, right? So if a brand new guy, young guy comes to you, says, Coach, I just got this job. I want to start to really build a successful high school football program. What would be like the first piece of advice you'd give them?
Understand fundamentals and teach fundamentals from day one right through your entire career. Fundamentals is the key. How well you do on the field, and that leads to fundamentals in practice, fundamentals in the classroom, fundamentals in discipline. Be consistent.
You coached, before the state champion, the state playoff format that we have, and also before the expansion from 4 classifications to 6 classifications. Do you think that for Northeast Pennsylvania, do you think it's a better situation now for our student athletes because of, the 10-game schedule and the state playoff schedule the way it is now? Or do you think it was better back when we had the 11 games, the bye week, the 2 weeks of doubles and 2 scrimmages, and then maybe only the Eastern Conference kind of thing? How do you feel about the two different, scenarios?
I kind of like the old system better. And the reason I'd say that is going to 6 classifications, more teams get involved in the playoffs. But I've seen situations where some of the teams getting in the playoffs are average at best. And I think that kind of has watered down the system a little bit. And there's pros and cons to both sides. I kind of like the four classifications. I kind of like the playing up in schedule. And I just like the competition a little bit better.
And for now, Wyoming area has always had, I think, a fairly successful history of multi-sport athletes, and I think more and more in these years, 2024 and beyond, there's more of a push by some coaches, not all coaches, but by some coaches, especially travel coaches, right? And that's where football's kind of lucky in that perspective. There's not really a whole lot of travel involved, but other sports have it. How do you feel? What's your take on teams or players that are just focused, like, a great basketball player and he's playing basketball 11 months out of the year? And like, what's your take on it? I know what the answer is going to be. I just want to hear from you about, the necessity of multi-sport athletes.
I think, first of all, in a school our size, you got to utilize all your athletes. And I encourage my athletes to play multiple sports. The key is, though, I said, while you're doing multiple sports, you also have to find time to get in the weight room and lift and become bigger, faster, and stronger. And that only helps you in all the sports. But when I'm looking for an athlete, and again, when I saw our kids come back for the dedication, how many of my former players were 2 and 3 sport athletes? And again, I think that's good. I think a running back that's a point guard on the basketball team, he makes the same decision he has to make when he's running the football as decides which way he's going, or a defensive back. I like kids that are multi-sport, but I think don't narrow your mind down to being only one sport in high school. And you're going to find out that many kids develop after they leave high school to become so much better athletes down the road.
Now, this isn't really a high school football question, but I do want your opinion on it. What do you think about, the transfer portal and things like that going on in college football?
I think college coaches are pulling their hair out between the transfer portal and the NIL deal. There's just no way to establish a program. And one of the problems you have is that the transfer portal is allowing athletes to transfer not once, but twice or 3 times, sometimes in a year. So how do you establish a program? I think the NCAA is going to have to come up with a limitation on transfer portal, either making you, once you transfer, once you can't transfer again for a year. There's just too much going on. It's not a good situation. A high school kid comes into a college program, he finds out he's not the starter, and right away he's on the transfer portal the next day. I don't know how college coaches do it. And I think maybe that's one of the things that Nick Saban talked about, why he got out of it, that it became too frustrating.
And I think, from the player standpoint, for the student athlete coming out of high school, it's got to be even harder, because now some of these schools, I'm sure, maybe they're not recruiting high school as hard because they're just looking around to cherry pick for, disgruntled kids from another program. You know what I mean? So it's that much harder to find yourself being recruited by some of these, these Power 5 schools or whatnot.
Absolutely. And couple that with the NIL situation, that you have high school athletes now going in negotiating how much their NIL deal is before they've even put a foot on the field. And as Coach Saban has said, how do you know if they can even play? And yet they're asking for 5 and 6 figure contracts. It's hard.
I understand the need behind it, or the push, because, they have these young guys out there putting themselves in harm's way. A lot of them don't make it from college to pro. That's a very, very small percentage of people that will get paid, officially to play in the pros. So they want some kind of compensation because they're making lots of money and I understand that, but like you said, the way that there's really no rules and it's wide open, it's like the Wild West. They really have to figure this out a little bit better.
I think the NIL is fine, but I think your limitations are distributed over your 120-man teams in college. The guy that's the third offensive tackle that works his butt off all through practice that makes that first tackle or that first running back or that first quarterback great, give them part of the NIL deal too. Make it equal across, not equal across the board, but spread it across the board so that everybody benefits from it, not just one or two of the great kids.
Now, if you had to, if you could go back in time to young coach Paul Marranca when he took over in the mid 70s, would you have any advice based on all the experience that you've had over your career? Anything that you would have told him that maybe would have made it a little bit easier on that journey? What do you think?
I think you learn by experience. One of the things, again, I had a great mentor. As I said, Coach Enzis was just outstanding. And if I had a problem or anything, I always talked to him. But, again, go with your gut. If you come from a program that was established, and use that as a role model. Success breeds success.
Gotcha. Very, very, very good advice, Coach. Well, listen, we'll wrap up now. I really appreciate you giving us the time, having this conversation with you. So, we wish you well in the future. Hopefully you're enjoying that warm weather in Arizona, and we'll catch up with you down the road.